Hello and welcome to The Charity Show, the podcast for charity insiders by charity insiders. Please rate, follow or subscribe to us on your usual podcast platform. And here's what's coming up in episode 12.
I think this is quite the shocking statistic, if you believe we're a nation of pet lovers, that a leading animal rescue charity, Cats Protection, has found that in the first 7 months of this year alone, abandoned cat cases have soared to 30%.
And I think since Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it into X, there have been rising concerns about the lack of investment in content moderation, how the algorithms are working to promote the worst aspects of humanity, about safeguarding the users on your platform and tackling misinformation. And Elon Musk's personal posts on the platform have really driven some very, very divisive things, and not just in the online space, but with quite devastating real-world consequences.
Organiser Michelle Oldfield rallied her community to take part in a photo shoot for the cheeky 2025 calendar. The months feature more than 30 people and capture the stunning beauty of the Vale of Belvoir, and the stunning beauty of other aspects as well, I imagine, and has so far raised £2,000 for Breast Cancer Now and Prostate Cancer UK.
If my fundraising team suggests such a thing like that, I will definitely be politely declining that one.
What month would you choose,
Mr. September or so? Never going to happen. No, never going to happen.
Hello, welcome to episode 12 of The Charity Show with me, Tim Bainan, Head of Marketing Engagement at the Firefighters Charity.
And me, Piers Townley, PR Manager at the Brain Tumour Charity.
So what's been going on, Piers? What's your last fortnight look like?
It's actually been a weird kind of forward planning moment for the charity. We're actually looking now to March 2025, but March is the Brain Tumour Charity's kind of Hero Awareness Month. It's officially known as the Brain Tumour Awareness Month, so it's BTAM for short. And during that, we have our Twilight Walk, which is a bit of a kind of a hero campaign, a fundraiser awareness for us. It's everyone in the community comes together. We do a 10K and a 5K walk around a location. And since COVID, we've had to scale back and just focus on being in London. But this will be the third year that we're in London. So the Twilight Walk we've been building all the materials, all the comms, all the engagement and the segmentation over on our email journeys. And that's just launched today, actually. So the 2 weeks before this, or actually more than 2 weeks before this, all the teams have been building up. And as a comms team, as a PR team, we're kind of on the periphery at the moment. We will start stepping up our involvement. Yeah, a bit busy, but also that kind of, okay, we're looking now 6 months in advance and other things beyond Christmas, which is kind of a disjointed, but it's just the way all charities work, isn't it? I guess you've been the same.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about Twilight Walk. I can't help but think of the Do-Gooders show, which Garrett was on a couple of weeks back, and obviously the Tiki Torch walk that went terribly wrong. But yours is not going to go wrong. You're not going to have the police chasing you and all that kind of stuff.
There's no tiki torches allowed. I mean, there won't be marauding hordes of tiki wielding supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same for us really here at the Firefighters Charity. There's lots going on as ever, and forward planning again. And Christmas seems to be forefront of everyone's mind at the moment. So we're talking about all the things we've got coming up for Christmas, and then looking ahead to January as well. And it's funny how you got to really start thinking about those January deadlines and getting things to the printers in time, because things close down over Christmas and so on and so forth. So everything becomes a little bit kind of, geez, you've got to take that Christmas break into account and think ahead. So I'm still in denial that it's happening at all. I'm so massively unprepared for it personally. I haven't even thought about it. I do know people, I don't know where you sit on this issue, Piers, people who've done their shopping and wrapped it and stuff already. That's alien to me completely. Shopping is something that happens in December, not in October.
As an unnamed member of my family was boasting how they bought some of their Christmas stuff last year in the sales, and they're very, very pleased with themselves. That it's like, I'm literally just waiting till I get through to the weekend at the moment, let alone in 6 weeks' time.
Whenever that Amazon Prime Day is, just blitz it on that one day, get everything sent. That's the mission. So anyway, I must ask you though, before we get on to charity related stuff, as someone who has a young dog like I do, I'm really, really struggling to stop my dog from digging up the garden. This puppy, almost 6 months, is basically turned our garden into like the Somme. It's insane the amount of digging. Do you have any tips? Any tips to stop a dog from digging up your garden?
No, is the answer.
Oh, brilliant.
But you get so much unsolicited advice. I think it's probably like having kids. It's like having pets. Everyone's got a solution. Everyone's got an idea. Do they work? I don't know. It's just trial and error. Yeah.
Right, I want to hear from all those. Animal charity people out there. What are their tips for stopping a dog from digging up the garden, because it's driving us insane?
Yeah. Back to your dog, Sam. Give us a shout. What can you do?
Yeah.
How can you help?
Absolutely. This week, though, we're shining a spotlight on the ethics of social media, and it's fantastic to have our guest Adeela Warley, CEO of the fantastic charity Comms, on the show a little bit later. And working in comms, Piers, it's part of our daily lives. Of course, social media, can't escape it. But how do you personally feel about it? You know, work aside, how do you feel about the whole social media thing?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because I'm of the age, and I think you are, Tim, as well, where we weren't digital natives when it comes to social media. We've had to learn at speed in our roles and our various careers, and now it sits at the forefront of, I think, of what we do as a comms team. I mean, we have a brilliant social media team, a lot younger than me, a brilliant social media team with the Brain Tumor Charity, and they're all over the channels that we use. But it's interesting to find which social media works with different segments of our supporters. So our Facebook, for example, and our Facebook groups, they're closed, and they're still a really big part of what we do as our comms and our outreach towards our supporters. But our social media team are doing things on Insta and TikTok that I think is just largely witchcraft. So for me, it's been a really interesting but essential part of what we do as comms. Part of my role is to look after our celebrities. I do a lot of direct messaging with them. That could be over on Insta. It could even still be on X. So I'm having to learn. I'm having to use it as part of my armory.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's. I think we're at risk of sounding like grumpy old men here. I think because we're of a certain age where there's a whole generation after us who are much more au fait with social media than we are. But yeah, so I feel increasingly out of touch with it, I must admit. And seeing the stuff which my kids watch and the stuff that they engage with on social media, it's way out there. I am quite impressed by some of the high production values of some of the stuff that gets churned out. It's quite impressive to see, the amount of stuff that is produced, and also the quality of stuff that's produced, and how easy it is to create really sort of high quality content. I think that's really fascinating, really interesting. But no, I am definitely out of touch.
It's also interesting to me, is it? People say, "Oh yeah, we do social media," or "I do social media," and that is like, you do social media, but actually when you get into it, it's a highly specialized, and increasingly so. It's not just about churning out content. We've had to do it with the charity show. It's the scheduling, it's the timing, it's the analytics, the metrics behind it. It's the trend spotting and responding to that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how that will evolve. I wonder what influence AI will have on social as well. It has been fascinating to see the amount of content and AI generated content that's been churned out in America at the moment as a result of the US election. Also, the other thing that kind of scares me a bit about social media is how the algorithms work. It's now, again, this is witchcraft in terms of the fact that you could be looking at something to buy on Amazon, and all of a sudden, you jump on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, and you're being shown ads and content relating to the thing you were looking at on a completely separate platform. That kind of stuff, really sort of blows my mind in terms of how that works. And then it worries me from as a parent, in terms of the amount of doom scrolling that kids inevitably do when they're on social, and the kind of things that they're being shown and they're being seen. Mm-hmm. Again, those algorithms are just chucking stuff at them that they might not, that the big computers in the sky think that they want to see, but it might not be appropriate at all. So that really terrifies me.
It's an emerging thing, isn't it? And we're the generation they're dealing with it now, are the canaries in the mine, really, to see what happens with it.
Right then, let's take a look at some third sector news. What jumped out at you on your social feed this week, Piers?
So on the back of the news, we featured about dogs and animal charities in a very recent episode of the show. It's to do with the increasing number of older dogs being given up and the charities having to respond to this. This time, for me, more animals, but it's all about cats. Now, I'm a reluctant dog person. I had to bow to the pressure from my kids over the years. But I think this is quite the shocking statistic, if you believe we're a nation of pet lovers, that a leading animal rescue charity, Cats Protection, has found that in the first 7 months of this year alone, abandoned cat cases have soared to 30%. And last year, they said they helped around 184,000 moggies, which is about 500 a day. So really, the demand for these charities, these animal charities, has gone through the roof. And they've cited in their reports the pandemic lockdown boom for cats and dog ownership has hit bust, they say. So the Cat Protection has said that the increasing vet bills, cost of living, prioritising household budgets. All of this has fed into this crisis, as they've called it. And they've got a piece of research they've done, which is a bit of genius in the title as well. It's called Cats and Their Stats. And this piece of research found that 1 in 3 cat owners feel greatly impacted, is the quote, by current financial climate. And 18%, which is a lot of people, are cutting back on vital vet services such as vaccinations. This has drawn the RSPCA into the problem as well, and they're urging people to adopt rather than buying a pet, saying that research centres are, quote, drowning in animals. And of course, the RSPCA and our connections on that charity will feature in upcoming episodes of the show. But it starts figures all round, whether you're a cat or a dog person, Tim. Something that jumped out at me this week. What about you?
News that I spotted this week, I think something that really stood out for me, because I love a bit of branding. And obviously we've talked a lot about brand on the show before, but this is a royal rebrand. So this is rebrand on a whole nother level. So it's a great story. So this is a story about rebranding, and everyone's probably aware of this already, but the Prince's Trust has rebranded as the King's Trust for obvious reasons. This is a big deal. Logo change, name change, and everything that goes with it. But the man who's done it, James Somerville OBE, did it on a pro bono basis because he himself was a former beneficiary of the Prince's Trust. I think that's just a really nice story. So this chap, James Somerville OBE, and he's very famous in the design world. I'll just read you a little bit of his background here. So he is one of more than 1.3 million people who have been supported by the now King's Trust around the world to date. He co-founded his first design agency, Attic, with the support and a grant from the Trust in the UK in 1986, when he was a 19-year-old street artist in Huddersfield. Since then, he's gone on to achieve amazing success. He's become one of the UK's most respected, or his firm has become one of the UK's most respected design firms, bought out by a Japanese company in 2007. He went on to become Vice President of Global Design at Coca-Cola. You don't get bigger than that, really, in terms of design jobs. And he now lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and is a patron of the Trust as well. And he's given back by rebranding them as the King's Trust. And that's an amazing story for them. I just think a really nice story all round. And a great bit of branding. So the Prince's Trust is now the King's Trust. So that was something that jumped out to me. And the other story that's a cracker for 2 reasons. Firstly, the title of the story, Invisible Chips. That's a great story, caught my eye straight away. And it's basically a restaurant in Amesbury. Portions are giving away portions, or actually rather not giving away, customers are buying portions of invisible chips in order to raise money for Hospitality Action, a charity that looks after the hospitality sector. So diners choosing to buy invisible chips for £2 to the catering industry charity, which supports anyone working in the hotels and catering industry in their time of need. And the other reason this jumped out to me, this story, is the chief operating officer is a guy called Adam Charity. What an awesome name. A brilliant name. So
it's
2 reasons
destiny for him.
Yeah, brilliant. Adam Charity doing fantastic charity work. So well done, Adam. You're living up to your name there. Awesome work. So yeah, there you go. 2 cracking stories this week.
I expect someone to come up with invisible mushy peas next. Let's crack on with the Friday night dinner being invisible and charitable.
I'd give to charity and take actual mushy peas. Love mushy peas. Two years ago, Elon Musk bought Twitter for a staggering $44 billion. Soon thereafter, dropping its familiar Bluebird logo and rebranding it as X. Since then, though, the platform has been undergoing a transformation. 80% of its workforce has been cut, content moderation rules have been relaxed, new features have been introduced, and charges applied. The result, according to many commentators and critics, is that X has today become a hotbed for misinformation and hate, with an increase in engagement with extreme content mirrored by a decrease in engagement with fact-checkers and less biased media. So where does all this leave charities today? A strong social media presence is vital to most charities' comms plans. It's something we're all very familiar with, allowing them to engage directly with their beneficiaries and supporters. But are charities now facing an ethical dilemma when it comes to X? Adeela Warley, CEO of Charity Comms, thinks they are, and the membership organisation for charity communications professionals has consequently scaled back its activity on X as a result. Others, meanwhile, like Akivo, have withdrawn from X completely, stating that it no longer aligns to their organisational values. Is this a turning point for charities in terms of their use of social media? What are the implications for comms teams, and does this now open the door for new emerging social media technologies? We sat down with Adeela recently to find out. Adeela, great to see you. Thank you for joining us here on the Charity Show. It's lovely to welcome you onto the show. As comms guys ourselves, Piers and myself, we're very familiar with charity comms and big fans of all that you do. So it's fantastic to welcome you onto the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why we were really fascinated, because we're comms guys ourselves, about charity comms' decision to kind of scale back your activity on X. It's something that seems to be in the news quite a lot recently, but tell us a bit about why you decided to scale back and why now.
So, like most charities, we monitor our social media channels regularly. That's a job that's never done, right? And this analysis informs our wider social media strategy. And after some really thought-provoking discussions with the team and with our trustees, we decided to scale back activity on X. And we're on a journey like many other organisations. And we'd already started to think about a new social media strategy and to try and align it with our organisational ambitions. And so we were reviewing also our channel insights. How were our channels performing? And the changes on X have given us more momentum, I suppose, to make that decision and to scale back and actually invest our resources in a more dynamic approach to social media. So we're going to keep monitoring X for ourselves and for the sector, and we'll continue to support our community who are struggling with some of these choices themselves.
Sure. And when you were having those discussions, you were talking about what steps to take. Was the prospect of withdrawing from X completely on the table? Was that something that you discussed?
Yes, it was. But we decided that it was actually important for now, to still put some time into being on that channel. Many of our members are still there, and we have a role in seeing what they're up to, helping to be their champion, spreading messages about their campaigns and their asks. It's also a place where we track what's going on in the sector. It's the place for breaking news. So those things are still quite important to us. And so that's why we haven't chosen to completely leave the platform for now. I mean, this is a really, really live issue for so many organisations. And I think that's what's prompted you maybe to ask to have a chat about it, because we've seen, certainly in the sector press, lots of charities adopting a whole spectrum of positions. And that's right, because I really feel that there isn't one solution that fits all. That definitely isn't the approach. And it's interesting, I think, over the summer when there was so much unrest in the country, many charities took to their social media channels. They did so in order to really champion the communities that were being targeted by hate, to communicate really powerful counter narratives. I was really struck by the fundraising that went on. I'm sure you'll remember that Citizens Advice Office in Sunderland was vandalised, and there was a fundraising effort on social media to help repair the damage. So I think all of that it shows just how social media continues to be a part of most charities' toolkit. And I think communicators at the moment are really on the front line. They're being asked to advise their CEOs, their trustees, also staff and volunteers in their organisation about what they should do. And because of that, we wanted to support them, and we held a recent social media event which created a safe place to reflect and to share their thought processes of what was going on for them. And we discovered some really important take-home messages, and I'll talk to you a bit about those now. So the first thing was that charities, I said that there's no one-size-fits-all, and that's because charities need to start with their mission what do they exist to achieve? Who do they need to reach and engage to drive the change that they're there to achieve? So keep the mission in mind. Also to be really data-driven, because I know from talking to people that, it's all too easy to be caught in the middle in a crossfire of different people's opinions and assumptions or their personal values that they bring to work and to their jobs. So really drawing on the analytics, what your performance KPIs are showing you is really important. And to think about your organizational strategy, as I've said. The other thing was very much about ways of working. So it was about making space in your organization and time for really open and honest discussion, because it isn't a yes/no answer. It really is nuanced. And so creating the space to do that was really important. And we know that social media managers, they're kind of they're on that always on culture. And so just please support those teams and be kind and understand that they've got an awful lot on their plate. And I think from our learning, we found that with a really clear definition of both what your charity's voice is and a definition of what each channel does for you, you can be confident, I think, that you can bring your audiences together for connection and to take action with you in the spaces that work best for you. So I think that's what we were learning really from listening to our community.
That's fascinating stuff, Adeela. I think this is the first time the spotlight has had to go on to a channel as well, isn't it? We're all fairly new to this. We're all learning at speed. And it's the first time that, for a variety of reasons, X has come under scrutiny. And teams and charities are having to decide whether they want to use it. I mean, as the brain tumour charity, we're finding several of our high profile celebrities, for example, they're just withdrawing themselves off. So that led us to then talk to our teams and get our teams together and say, well, what should we do with X and how should we do it? And again, it's a constant monitoring of it. But I know that other charities are actually leaving the platform altogether. The likes of Race Equality Foundation and Colchester and Ipswich Hospitals Charity. Are you surprised that charities are withdrawing from X? And do you think this will gain momentum in the future?
I'm not surprised, because look, that we've walked that journey as well. So no, not surprised. I think people are rightly calling for greater accountability from social media companies, like better moderation and responsibility from the owners themselves. And I think since Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it into X, there have been rising concerns about the lack of investment in content moderation, how the algorithms are working to promote the worst aspects of humanity, about safeguarding the users on your platform and tackling misinformation. And Elon Musk's personal posts on the platform have really driven some very, very divisive things, and not just in the online space, but with quite devastating real-world consequences. And one point that our community have made really boldly to us is that X is not Twitter. The platform has fundamentally declined, and many of their supporters are voting with their feet as well. But what I would say is, I think the glass half full in me is saying that these issues have helped to create a space for innovation to thrive, and that the disruption in the tech marketplace is creating new platforms. They're emerging, and this is giving audiences more options and a possibility of something else. And I think, while none of us we've not got a crystal ball, we can't predict what will happen with social media. I think that I take heart that people power can help reclaim social media for the better. It can be a space where people come together to make positive change in the world, so people can still influence the future of social media.
I think that's your point there around owners is a really interesting one, because these aren't necessarily organisations that are managed by a big board of directors or a big board of trustees, making sure that decisions are made in a certain way. This is an organisation, X is an organisation that can be fundamentally impacted by one man's tweets, whatever, or I don't know if they're called tweets anymore, whatever they're called, one man's posts them from one day to the next. And that's, as you say, that's exactly what we're seeing. But at the same time, divisive content and misinformation is not something that's unique to X, is it? It's something that does span platforms as a whole. So why do you think, do you believe actually that it is because of those outside influences, things like Musk buying Twitter, and then also things like Musk aligning himself and where he stands in the US election, for example, helping to generate some of that content, and therefore X is beginning to stand in isolation to the others in terms of the amount and volume of this kind of divisive content.
I agree. I totally agree with what you said. But I think that is the reason that's driving this in particular around that platform. But we know that all social medias have their downside, and that's why there's been a really positive move to bring in the online safety bill now an act, and we will see how that really does influence the regulation of the platforms themselves. And the tech giants now, the owners of those platforms, in truth are becoming more powerful than traditional editors of newspapers. So we do need to have individual responsibility as well as policies that govern the platforms themselves.
And you mentioned earlier on as well about the importance of protecting those social media teams, and there's people whose job it is, and it's not an easy job, to monitor what goes on across the multiple platforms that most charities are on these days. What would your advice be, or how does charity comms, or how can charity comms sort of support charities to help those teams, to help those individuals to do that on a day-to-day basis?
So we provide a lot of information and resources, whether that's best practice guides or templates or the latest thinking through blogs, and all of that can be had on our social media hub. So that's a brilliant place for people to start out. But we've recognised that this whole issue has the charities need more support, and so we're creating a new social media channel checklist, and we're going to be releasing that really soon in the next couple of days. And what that's going to do is it's going to provide a structured way for charities to have that conversation, the questions they need to ask, the challenges that they need to make internally, so they can go through the checklist, and that will help them to tailor their own social media decisions and strategy in the longer term. So I'd really encourage people to have a look at that. We've had a wonderful expert working on with us on it, and I think it's going to be a really helpful resource for not just for our members, but the sector more widely.
I think that sounds fascinating. I think it'd be really interesting to see how teams can use that. But I think some of the challenges facing comms teams and social media teams is how they then potentially have those conversations with their senior leadership teams, just because they're seeing it much more at the coalface on a day-to-day basis. The senior leadership team will be one step removed, perhaps. So helping teams to have those conversations with their senior leaders will be really important.
Definitely.
And Adeela, Charity Comms mentions in the statement that they're, ploughing their energies into wider social media strategy in new and exciting ways. Can you expand a little bit on this, and what are the things that you'll be taking into account as part of this project, this ongoing project?
We have a really small comms team at Charity Comms, believe it or not. We're a tiny but mighty team. And so, like many small teams, we have to make strategic choices about where we invest our skills and our energy. And we're thinking a lot about how we can innovate, and this includes with our content and where that content is best placed to reach and inspire and engage our audience. And we found that LinkedIn has been a growing platform for us, and we want to invest more time here to actually build conversations and communities. And we feel that this just absolutely makes sense for us. So that's the shift that we're making at the moment.
Excellent. That's interesting. We had this conversation offline, Tim and I, when we launched the podcast, and ongoing when we're monitoring our social media presence and working out where do we place our efforts. It's a challenge, and it's really interesting to keep one foot in front of the other when you are looking at all these different channels.
Just to interject, I'd agree completely that LinkedIn seems to be the place where, as a sector, we're having those conversations. Yeah. So it seems to be the place where kind of safe space, if you like, for us to have those, for the sector as a whole to have those kind of conversations.
Dare I say it, podcasts. We're on a podcast, and that is a brilliant place for really thoughtful conversation out of the kind of reactive space, but a place for reflection and exchange of ideas. And I saw a wonderful roundup by Madeleine Sugden, who's in our community as well, a freelancer, of all the podcasts that are out there. So yeah, yay podcasts.
Yeah. Oh, we'll take that onwards and upwards. Where do you stand on emerging platforms such as the likes of Blue Sky and perhaps some further ones that are going to be in there in the future?
We are watching with great interest Blue Sky. Many of our members are already there, and we've been asked whether we're going to join. And again, it's a question of resource, isn't it? But we'll keep monitoring it, and if it looks like it's going to offer the sector and us a place, then we'll be there. But I think it's test and learn at the moment.
Yeah. I think you can feel that, can't you? In other charities and other comms teams that we talk to or interact with, they're all keeping an eye on what is emerging and where is the best use of, as you say, often limited resources and smaller teams. So
yeah, I mean, these are not small teams; they're slightly larger charities. But we've had presentations and talks with RSPB and the National Trust, and they've been experimenting. So RSPB have been using TikTok really effectively, and they found that has brought them more of the Gen Z generation there. And the National Trust have been experimenting with Threads as a place not for campaigning, not for push broadcast communications, but for engagement and fun. There's a lot of talk about scones, as you can imagine. So, but they're really good examples of how charities are testing and learning and exploring the ecosystem of social media options available to them, but for good strategic reasons.
Now, we're seeing some of that at the Brain Tumour charity. The last 6 months has seen us, not me personally, a social media team. For me, it's largely witchcraft, but they've been exploring TikTok as well. And we found a great deal of engagement, as you say, with the younger audience to sort of spread our campaigning and spread our work. But I can see it in the comms team when I'm sitting next to them doing social media team, is that very much that test and learn. It's like treading and just seeing what happens and then reporting back, and obviously then reporting back to the wider charity as a whole, especially SLTs and CEOs.
Yeah, but internal comms is such an important part of the piece.
I've been enjoying the TikTok trend for the Gen Z writing the scripts for charities, and full of the kind of language that my kids talk, and they're really nothing to me.
Over my head.
Yeah. Do you just talking about Blue Sky though, Adeela, do you think that possibly this might be the time for emerging smaller tech companies to sort of get a bigger slice of the pie, as it were? Because is there perhaps a bit of a fear or a skepticism about the motives behind the tech giants, the X's and the Metas of this world?
Yeah, definitely. And I when you look back at when Twitter started, I think that was more of the ethos, wasn't it? It was much more progressive and community minded, but obviously things do change. So I think you've definitely got something there.
And just looking at the social media landscape in sort of broader terms, what are some of the other challenges you're perhaps seeing, or that you're aware of, and that the charity comms is helping charities with at the moment? Is there things like perhaps an overdependence on social media as a comms tool? Or is the balance right amongst charity comms teams in terms of how much weight they put on social media? What are some of those other sort of challenges you're seeing?
Well, we've touched on one already, actually, which is about leadership. So the Charity Digital Skills Report this year highlighted the need for trustees and senior teams to enrich their understanding of how digital works, because that is absolutely crucial in underpinning reputation management, managing risk for your organisation, and also supporting your social media teams, understanding the challenges they face and the choices that they're having to make. So I think that is a recurring theme that we hear from professional comms people. The second is being time poor. This is just such a beating drum at the moment that teams are incredibly stretched. And monitoring social media and testing and learning, both things we've just talked about, they take time. And so I think permissioning teams to have that time and space to go to events, to do training and do networking, that time is well invested. It will really repay you if you invest in it. So those were two themes that I think are broader digital social media than social media trends.
Do you think as well that for some charities that social media can perhaps paint a bit of a misleading picture in regards to sort of engagement and support? I think the old chestnut that likes do not necessarily lead to donations. Can and are charities perhaps putting too much emphasis on social at the expense maybe of some of the more traditional media, some direct mail, or obviously that's much more expensive, but those sort of more traditional forms of comms?
I think charities have always had to have a really diverse portfolio of tools and tactics, both online and offline. And one of the things from a comms professional perspective that COVID taught us is that we have to have the ability to rapidly flex, and we had to flex away from real world activity to online activity, and that pendulum is swinging back, and you only have to look at things like challenge events. They're really on the up. So I think that flexibility to respond to the external environment as well as to technology sits at the heart of really effective communications. We definitely need to move away from vanity metrics, as you mentioned. And I think that the only way to do that is to have complete clarity about which channels you're using and why, which audiences you need to talk to, and what you want them to do with you. And then be able to monitor the impact of those channels in delivering those things for you. And so it's about setting measurable and meaningful KPIs and ones that you can not just track, but you can actually use to change what you're doing. So they're actionable tracking measures. And I'll mention Charity Comms' digital benchmark. So this is a tool that is run by us for a tech company called Uprise Up. And what it does is it allows charities to monitor all their digital performance KPIs, but not only their own performance, but to look at how they're doing within the sector. So that's a really good tool for helping charities to understand what's going on and make good choices.
Some great signposting there for some tools that the charities can actually use. And in the wider world at the moment, obviously we'd agree when the podcast comes out entering the election. So misinformation is going to be the buzzword, and it has been for a long time. We recently had Saskia Cronenberg from NCBO came on the show, and she said that charities should, quote, verify information, train their teams, deal with misinformation quickly, and report misleading or fake content efficiently. So is this issue about training or retraining social teams to be more aware of misinformation out there?
Well, really great advice from Saskia, who happens to be a trustee at Charity Comms. So definitely follow that advice. And I do think that training and the ability to be responsive is very much part of the answer here. But I think it's also really important to be aware of the best practice and insights when it comes to how you deal with misinformation. So we work quite regularly with Frameworks UK, and they've talked a lot to our communities about the dangers of myth busting. It can backfire. Things that you're actually trying to get rid of, if you by talking and leading your communications on those facts and figures, you can actually reinforce them and embed even more. So do take a look at Frameworks UK. They've got some fantastic guidelines about the top tips of how to, if you are going to do myth busting, how to avoid the traps. And then the other thing I'd say is we have a social media policy template, which is really, really helpful. And I think the Charity Commission have been happy to promote it as well to the sector. And just bookmark our social media hub, because that's where you can get the latest news and opinions on coping with all of these challenges.
Because I think especially if you were a new member to a charity and a new member to a social team, it would be seen as quite daunting, wouldn't it? You have this skill set in terms of you're able to do social content and you know all the analytics and stuff, but actually then to be the voice of a charity on a social media platform must be quite a terrifying experience, perhaps in view, when you're first getting into it. So a good signpost there as well.
Definitely.
You don't want to fan the flames of misinformation. That's why, as you say, with the myth busting, it can backfire, can't it?
It can backfire. And I think, it can be a lonely job. So my message is just don't try and go it alone. Reach out, use people like Charity Comms and connect with your peers, because they can share their experiences and you can learn from each other. That's what it can be about.
Yeah, that's a good bit of advice, because obviously our social team for our charity is sitting very close to the PR team, so the comms, so we get it. There's a lot of internal work that they have to do to then justify and explain what they do to SLT or to trustees or to extended teams. So yeah, it's a bit of a minefield, I think, at times for them.
It is, and I think so. We support not just external communications teams, but internal communications team is one of the strongest special interest group that we have. And we see the charities where internal comms works really closely alongside external comms team. That is the key to success. I'll tell you, a charity that does it so brilliantly is the RNLI. They just are so aligned, and internal comms teams, they set the tone for the internal culture, and they can make sure that all those internal stakeholders, your volunteers, your staff, your donors, all of those people are on the same page. Not just that they're on the inside track, that they know what you're going to say almost before you said it.
And moving away from that minefield then, for a moment, Adeela, we'd like to ask you about the Charity Comms Inspiring Communicator Awards. Tell us a little bit more about them, because I think the deadline is just closed by the time the show goes out. But what are they about?
So it's one of the happiest times of my year. I absolutely love the Inspiring Communicators Awards, and really this is about celebrating those whose services to charity communications really go above and beyond, and it highlights people who particularly demonstrate spirit and insight and skill, and above all are able to inspire others to get involved. So yeah, the nominations are open until the 21st of October. So yeah, that's what we're doing with the Charity Comms Awards this year.
It's exciting stuff. And as I remember rightly, from looking at the website, Vicky Beavers, who was on the show a few episodes back from the Sleep Charity, I think she won your Strategic Leader of the Year awards last year. The incredible work she does with the Sleep Charity, she is fantastic. And I believe she's on the judging panel this time around as well. Tell us a little bit about the panel. Who's going to be judging the winners?
Well, we have lots of categories, so we have quite a few judges. So I don't think I can. I don't think you'll want me to read them all off. But what I will tell you is that we've got the panel is made up of 9 of last year's winners from those categories, and then 6 of Charity Com's own trustees. So that's the judging panel.
Fantastic. And when are the awards themselves?
Well, we're innovating. So we will be doing an online screening event using LinkedIn, and that is going to be on the 4th of December. From 11 till 12:15, and there'll be more information about that on our website. And this year we're really keen to tell the stories behind the scenes of why our winners have won in their category, what skills, what lessons they can share with the sector. So we're really delighted to be investing more in that backstage storytelling.
Stories are key, aren't they? Always.
They really are. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Adeela, for joining us, and you've given us so much food for thought on so many things, not let alone, just X as a platform. And all the very best for the awards. We'll be watching and hopefully speaking to some of the winners in due course. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tim and Piers. I've really enjoyed it.
In each episode of The Charity Show, we want to celebrate our sector superstars, those incredible people working, volunteering and fundraising across our sector. And you can nominate your deserving colleagues, volunteers or fundraisers. Just email us at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or get in touch through the links in the show notes. You can even send us a voice message that we can play out in the next episode. Who's your superstar this week, Ted?
Okay, my superstar this week is a lady called Michelle Oldfield. And this is a story about a calendar. And it's not something new. We've all heard of these kind of charity calendars in the past, but this is a community sports group which has posed for a charity calendar that captures the beauty of an area, but with a playful twist. And I bet you can probably guess what the playful twist is. Cricketers, netballers and cyclists across the Vale of Belvoir in the East Midlands all feature in this calendar girl style Belvoir Unveiled nude calendar for 2025. Organiser Michelle Oldfield from Crockwell Bishop, which itself is a fantastic place name, love that, in Nottinghamshire, said she wanted to raise awareness after being treated for breast cancer, and she rallied her community to take part in a photo shoot for the cheeky 2025 calendar. The months feature more than 30 people and capture the stunning beauty of the Vale of Belvoir, and the stunning beauty of other aspects as well, I imagine, and has so far raised £2,000 for Breast Cancer Now and Prostate Cancer UK. So well done, Michelle. I think that's a great job. Yeah, amazing. Keep an eye out for that calendar. What about you, Piers? Who's your superstar?
Well, I just think if my fundraising team suggests such a thing like that, I will definitely be politely declining that one.
What month would you choose?
Mr. September also. Never going to happen. No, never going to happen. I'm not sure why I've gravitated to animal news and stories this podcasting, but one caught my eye. Isn't a person as such, but a collection, and it's a collection of dogs. And I love the impact that snowman stories have around this time of the year, around Christmas time of year, and the impact those stories had when my kids were growing up around Christmas. And inspired by them are the Snowdog sculptures, which is fundraising for the Blythe House Hospice. The Blythe House Hospice, mouthful there, in Derbyshire. And it's going to feature 12 large Snowdog sculptures from artists across the UK, and they're going to be on display around the town of Buxton, and they're going to be auctioned off in December. Each one's going to have a reserve price of £1,500, but some of the designs and some of the art on them are just absolutely beautiful, and obviously based on that lovely story around that time of year. And Sophie Wheeldon, the senior community fundraiser of Blythe House Hospice, said, "I think they are absolutely incredible. They're so unique, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us as a hospice and for Buxton as a town to get something like this. It is beautiful to see them here in all their glory." And they look brilliant, Tim, and they're inspired from such a Christmassy, wonderful story, and to support the simply incredible work the hospice do in the area. And indeed, a big shout out to all the hospices around the UK and all they do for so many people. I think in both roles that we have at the charities, we see so much great work being done by hospices, and sometimes they are overlooked. But they are an incredible function that everyone should get behind.
I think there's a brilliant fundraisers. I've seen them before. I know in Bristol they had Wallace and Gromit statues around the city for a while, and they were all auctioned off, raised a huge amount of money for charity, because they not only give an artist an opportunity to show their skill, they also brighten up the local community. They give people something to visit, to look at, and to try and find around the whole of Bristol. Remember, there was a hunt you could go on around Bristol to find all the Wallace and Gromits, and at the end of the day they're auctioned off and they raise a huge amount of money for charity. So yeah, more of that. I think
it's a winner all round, isn't it? Winner.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it for episode 12. Huge thanks to Adeela for really giving us something to consider, professionally and personally, in terms of whether to stay on X or turn to something new. And we've got some other great guests coming up on the next few episodes too.
Absolutely, we certainly have. Coming up next time, we're going to be talking about challenge events with Tracy Ann Breeze and finding out why charities need to be doing more of them. And in November, we'll also be discussing philanthropy and major donors, and we'll be welcoming a very special celebrity guest onto the show to talk about his penchant for extreme challenges. So find out who he is in a few episodes' time.
Sounds intriguing. And don't forget, you can be part of the show too. Just send us your voice messages or get in touch through any of the links in the show notes to share your stories and tell us what you'd like us to cover.
And don't forget, we want to know who your superstar fundraisers, volunteers or colleagues are too. So head to the show notes and share their brilliance with the rest of us.
And in the meantime, please follow or subscribe to us on your usual podcast platform and leave us a review, both of which will help others to find the show.
So that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Take care, and we'll see you soon.